We're doing a test, Shannon, and we are on Zoom lines, so just.
Test 1, 2, 3, test 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing, 1, 2, 3.
One. Yeah. 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 One, two, three. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that boundaries to speak. So you could hear it in here, right?
Yes. All right, let's try that and hopefully it doesn't feedback. If it does, just keep your hand on it.
1 2. Oh yeah. 1 2. 1 2 1 2 1 2.
How does this sound for a level through your speakers?
This sounds fine.
Too loud or? Okay, I'm gonna go do the boundaries, see if it's any different. And this is a boundary test. 1, 2, 3. Is that about the same level as the lab? 1, 2, 3. All right, good. There's our numbers.
That's a great question, because the complaint on pickleballs was. And there are neighbors back there.
Good evening and welcome tonight to our community forum to discuss the school project, the school referendum project. We are going to take you through some slides that illustrate the need for the school project and why we're doing it now, and then we will turn over to questions that you might have. I won't spend too much time on the slide so that we can get to your questions, but we have Ray here who will kind of moderate the online for me. And then we'll take it from inside as well. Very quickly, my name is Shannon Lindstrom. I'm the school board chair. We have some members in here. We have one counselor, Corey Fellows, in the back of the room that can help if we have any questions that specifically pertain to the town. And then we also have two people here from our school building committee, members of the community that participated on the committee. So if you want to talk to them afterward about the process that they went through, we have Jim and we have Elizabeth here as well. So they're able to help answer questions about their process and things that they went through if you have some questions for them afterward. But I'll go ahead and get started. I do have just a heads, I think I told everybody here, but just in case you're interested, there are some flyers up here that pertain to each of the schools and the overall referendum question. And then there is this poster up here that illustrates the questions a little bit more that we'll go through. Okay. And as I'm going, feel free to ask questions along the way as well. All right. All right, so if you're online and you have a question you want to ask, we do have somebody here moderating. So if you can just raise your Zoom hand, it's the yellow, looks like a high five on the bottom of your Zoom screen, and then Ray can promote you and we'll hear from you. All right. All right, so we'll get going. So would you mind? Well, we have to, you know what? I have a Mac and that's probably confusing. We don't use that. Let's see. So maybe that arrow, this one. Yeah. Okay. So this slide is just an overview of the two questions. So I want to, before I hop into what the questions are and what they mean, I want to take one step back and kind of give you some background as to how we got here. So 2 years ago, we did go to referendum. We did ask for a consolidated school. And if you remember that time, it did fail. And it failed pretty big, quite frankly. And so the school board and the council at the time sat down and tried to make sense of that and how do we move forward. And where we landed with was we were going to create a committee made up of community members. So we were going to invite people to participate to come up with a solution. And we did that. And 65 people volunteered on the first committee. It was really big. It was in my mind, fantastic. I think everybody's mind probably fantastic as well. They started about 18 months ago and they put in many man hours. They met every Monday night for hours at a time. And the first iteration of that committee really dove into the information that we had collected. So they looked at the enrollment study. They looked at the architectural renderings. They looked at the consolidated school and the numbers that went into that decision. And ultimately what they came up with was 4 solutions that they wanted to move to a second committee that would then drill down and determine the best recommendation and best course forward. So that group of 65 pared down to 25 participants. Still good, yeah. And still very active, still meeting every Monday. So people that served on both committees donated 18 months of time to the town. And that was a weekly donation of at least 2 hours, sometimes longer. So quite an extensive donation of their time and talents. And so what they did in the second committee was they looked at community information. What is it the community wants? And so they surveyed, they held community forums, they took public comment, they read public emails, and really they got a sense of what the community was looking for. And what they landed on is that the community was very concerned about price and the community wanted to keep the neighborhood schools, majority of the community. So from that, they ended up coming down to the solution you see on the screen in front of you or on this board. And what it is it's a 2-part question. Yeah.
I don't think,
Presentation mode.
Oh,
and Ray, I don't know you're sharing with the Zoom people, your screen. See the green arrows? I think you have to click share. Huh?
And then pull up the presentation. Do you have multiple screens?
yeah, I'm on as a participant, a panelist.
Oh, it was a different computer or you
Yeah.
sharing? Sorry, all right.
So say stop share, right? The red box.
And then just put it in presentation. The bottom.
That a little easier to read, tiny bit better, yeah. Okay. I'm assuming people can see it on Zoom. Okay. Right, as we see it this way, okay. Okay, so, what the committee came down to was creating a solution that is a it's a 2-question solution. And that is really important, and I'll tell you why in just a second. So the first question on the referendum that you will see when you go to vote is at up to $129.85 million question. And that is a solution that's not for one school, that is a solution for 5. So I mentioned to you, it was really important to keep the neighborhood schools. So this first question maintains the 3 neighborhood schools. 2 of them, Pleasant Hill and Blue Point, will get additions and renovations. 8 Corners gets an entirely new school build. And so the boxes you see on the right-hand side, those are the different schools and what the architectural plan looks like. You can also see them on these flyers. It adds, I lovingly call it a Lego. It adds a small addition onto Wentworth that you can see in the bottom screen, the bottom square. It's a little blue extra piece. It's the Lego piece that fits into Wentworth. And then it adds pretty extensive renovations to the middle school. If you're familiar with the middle school, the entire 6th grade is in a portable that is detached from the school. And so what that means is they attend their core classes in the portables, but as they move and travel to art, music, lunch, gym, all of those things, they come out of that portable city for classroom setup, and they travel to the main building outside and then back and forth. So what this would do is it would add an addition onto the middle school that would remove that portable setup for the 6th grade. It would also right size the cafeteria so that our students can eat at appropriate times. Right now, we're up to, is it 5 lunches? 6 lunches at the middle school that start at 10:30 in the morning and run until 1:30 in the afternoon. Yes, I attended the middle school open house and heard from quite a few students that 10:30 is entirely too early for lunch. So, but that's what they have to do because that cafeteria is very small sized. And so this would right size the cafeteria. A couple other small additions are in there as well, but those are the big pieces of the project. The second question is contingent on the first passing. So 1 has to pass for 2 to pass. Question 2 adds a 2nd story addition at the middle school. So the first question is 1 story, the second question is 2 stories. And here's why that is important. When the committee, I mentioned to you, they looked at data, they reviewed information. One of the big pieces of information they reviewed is what's called an enrollment study. And what that does, it's part data, part crystal ball. What they're doing is they're looking at live births and they're looking at in-migration, so people moving to Scarborough, and they're determining how many people this district will serve in the schools. So the reason that the committee looked at it and updated it is because as kids are born in Scarborough, we have that information from census data. So they were able to update the enrollment study. Question 1 allows us to right size the middle school for all of our current students we know live here. Question 2 allows us to right size for who we project are coming to Scarborough. Okay, so I also mentioned to you the numbers were important here. the committee, when they were surveying and community foruming and reading emails, they got a figure, a dollar figure that residents were willing to spend, willing to absorb, and there is an increase in taxes. Of course, we do have to ask our taxpayers for this, right? And so that they did ask what the community would be willing to pay, and they came up with a figure, a range of dollars. From that, they were able to back into what a project would cost. So they did exactly that, and they came up to a maximum of 130 million is what the community felt that they could absorb. That is why that first question is 129.85. It got them the things that they needed to do to accommodate all of our kids that we know have been born here and live here. The second question, because it was going to be above that price tag, they still felt it was important. And so they wanted to give that question to the voters to decide. And that's why there's a split, and that's why you see the two. All right. Okay. These are some of the challenges that are facing all of our schools. Our K-2 schools were built in the 50s and 60s, and so they are pretty outdated for current educational standards and needs. Just simply put, education then was very different than it is now. So we are out of space. We, in some cases, 2 of our schools don't have a security vestibule. So that bottom photo is the entryway to one of our K-2 schools. So when someone comes from the outside, they walk directly into the school. And so it's things like that that we're accommodating for. We have a lot of shared space use in our buildings. For example, we have what's called a cafetorium at our K-2 school. So it's a cafeteria and gym that are combined, which doesn't sound like a big deal on the surface, but when you start peeling back the layers, it's really hard when you're trying to accommodate 200 plus kids in one space all day long. So they are constantly shuffling in and out, moving lunch tables, putting them away, bringing in PE stuff, putting it away, bringing lunch tables. Assemblies are very hard for them to do. Full school assemblies are very hard to do because they just are not able to. They have a 20-minute window to bring in kids, travel from all their classrooms, get them into the gym, get them situated, do a presentation, and get them back out so that they can accommodate lunch and gym classes. We also have other shared spaces in the schools. Special education shares a lot of space, and it's just not conducive to modern learning. This is our community process. So really, this is a solution that was developed and created by the community for this community. We are very, very proud. When I say we, the school board, the town council, are very proud of the process that this undertook. It was very successful. I mentioned to you the number of people that participated in this from the community. It was a big volunteer lift. But these are the things that they heard, and this is what they did. They were able to come up with a solution that put our students first, that really maintained those neighborhood schools, that was a responsible use of taxpayer dollars, and that allows for flexibility for future needs. All of the K-2 schools and Wentworth, honestly, have a little, if you look at the pictures close up, there's a dotted line. There's ability for us to continue to grow should we need it in the future. Next. Okay, and so then we kind of talk about why was this an option that the committee recommended. A lot of it is pretty much what I've already said, but there's a couple of things. First off, this project, when I say it's a responsible use of taxpayer money, this option, if you add the two together, came in $17 million lower than the second choice. Their second choice option was a consolidated school on a smaller scale, but a consolidated K-2 school. So this is a $17 million savings, if you will, by comparing the two projects. The other thing that this does is address those security needs I told you, our enrollment needs that I mentioned to you, and our programming needs. The other question we're frequently asked is, why is Eight Corners getting a new school? Why is that a new build? Well, for a few reasons. That is where our biggest piece of land, so there's the most room there in the land that we own at the 3 schools. There's also a lot of population growth. That's where most of our growth is concentrated in Scarborough right now, in the school in the area that would feed to the Eight Corners school. And that because we own the land at Eight Corners, we're able to build a new school without purchasing more land. So that was a significant cost savings to the project. If you are interested in knowing about your very specific tax, increase, what it would look like for you, there is a tool on our website, the building website. It's also on the town council page. So this QR code up here will take you to our building site. You can play around with this. You can type in your home value and you can see what your actual tax increase will be year over year. Couple of caveats about this tool. First off, the interest rate we used that we estimated in here is a more of a conservative number. That's because if you've been following what's happening, the interest rates have decreased. We did not decrease it in here. So we did so to just maintain for ease and to make sure everybody was using the same tool. So this is, we suspect that interest rate will not be as high as what's in here. The other thing that this does not take into account is anything that the town council can do to decrease the impact to taxpayers. They have a couple of things in the works right now. For seniors, they did increase the tax relief amount. So that was a really big win for them. It increased it by $200 a year. So that is to help offset the cost of this or any other project. The other thing that they are considering is an increase in their school impact fees. So that, as I understand it, and Corey, maybe you can help me if there's questions. They can't, council as a body cannot consider it unless there's a school project, the increase. So it is, the finance committee has considered it. They have a recommendation that they are going to bring to the full council. And it is slated, as I understand it, for December, as long as the school passes. And so what that would do is it would increase the amount that developers pay when they develop single family homes. That are viewed as the biggest impactor to the schools. So that it's 5,000 to 11,000 is the proposed. Is that right?
I believe so. I'm not on the finance committee, but I believe that's.
I think that's right. It's a current impact of 5,000. It would go up to roughly $11,000. So that would help to offset the cost to taxpayers. And none of those things are calculated here. So I say that to say this is almost feels like a worst case scenario. Like at the very maximum, this is what we expect to pay. Another question I'm frequently asked is, well, what if the project runs over? What if it costs more than what you said? And for us, there's no going over, there's no more. This is what we get. We get up to 129.85 million for question 1, and we get up to 10 million for question 2. So if something happens in the process and the project is going to cost more than 129.85 million, we have to figure out a way to adjust the project to meet the needs. So we cannot come back and get more or ask for more. This is it. This is what we get. This is the same thing for question 2. And combine. Okay, if you're interested in learning more, this is our QR code to the website. All of our information is on that website. You can play with the tax calculator. You can look at our frequently asked questions page. We use that we update that every week as we're asked questions that are really important from the community. When we've had these listening sessions, we've taken in questions and added them. So that is a really good place to check for more and updated information. Also, if you're interested, all of our meetings are there, past meetings. You can watch until your heart's content to all those 18 months of meetings. So all of that is there. And then these are just, I'm going to leave these up as we ask questions. These are the pictures of the schools and the proposed renovations and additions. So as you ask me questions, I'll kind of reference this as we go, but this is just the same flyers that are up here. So with that, I want to take a pause and ask you questions. If you're online and you want to ask questions, just remember, please raise your yellow hand. And Ray will kind of fluctuate between the people in person and the people on Zoom. So starting here, what questions do you have for me so far?
Does it have to be, well, my question is more political.
Yeah.
So I remember when we last voted, there were a lot of signs and they were against the school.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I didn't notice that so much this year. So is that, well, I have 2 questions. Were some of the people who were opposing, did they become part of this bigger community? Are they not, they're not seem to be opposing it as strongly?
So the question is, were the people opposed part of the committee and are they not opposing it as strongly? The people that were opposed to it, they did come and serve on the committee. So, when I say it was 65, it was 65. I think all 65, if we were all being honest, came in with a perspective and a decision in their head already. And so one of the very first things that we did was we asked that committee to kind of, we know you're coming with ideas and thoughts, but let's take a pause there and let's look at where the data leads us. And so we really, really asked the committee to do that work. And to their credit, they did exactly that. There is some opposition to this. There is, in full transparency, there is a thought that it is still too high of a price tag. So there are some signs that you'll see as you drive around. So yes, there is still some opposition. Good question. What else you got? Yes, sir. Oh, can you come up? I'm sorry, for those that have came in after we said this, there's microphones up to the front. So if you wouldn't mind coming to one of these 2 rows, that would be perfect when you ask questions. So people on Zoom can hear you. I don't think it's turned on. No.
Hi, so if I recall correctly, the last bond issue that was defeated, when the costs of the consolidated solution were compared to the neighborhood schools, the consolidated was considerably cheaper.
In operating cost.
It was operating costs, not construction costs.
No, because so his question was the cost for the consolidated school cheaper than keeping the neighborhood schools? Did you have any more question or is that?
No,
I
I
don't
was
wanna
just curious, why that difference this time around?
Sure,
Maybe
yeah.
it's a different time, different cost you're looking at. Operating versus construction, I don't know.
Yeah, so the consolidated school, the last go round, the consolidated school was cheaper. I'm sorry, was more expensive, excuse me. And the committee was able to get that number down. A big driver in that is that we don't have to buy land with this solution. So we are using and utilizing all of our available space that the town currently owns. And so that is a huge piece of that. There are some cost efficiencies when you consolidate that we don't realize because this, instead of being one project, this is spread out over 5 different schools and it's happening simultaneously. So there is some of that we're not going to realize, quite honestly, because it's a different project. But what the committee found is that those costs they were willing to absorb those costs to maintain their neighborhood schools. That was the feeling that the community expressed. Operating wise, it is more efficient and cheaper an operating cost to operate a consolidated school because you don't need as many teachers when you're operating one building versus 3 in the case of a K2 or K3 school. Again, something that committee asked and that the community was able to absorb those costs to maintain those 3 neighborhood schools. It was very important to them.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, online one.
All right, let's go ahead.
Christine.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So the way this is worded on the ballot, it is a yes or no question. There is no plan B if it doesn't pass. So I guess my question is, what happens if it doesn't pass? Doesn't this keep getting increasingly expensive and our schools are only getting more and more crowded? I'm not quite sure what happens if we don't pass this. So I'm just curious what the next step would be.
That's a great question. Yes, you are accurate. It is accurate to say that this will continue to get more expensive if it doesn't pass. Construction, correct me if I'm wrong, it's 3.5% roughly per year to add on. Does that sound right?
Give or take.
Yeah, give or take 3.5% added on each year that something doesn't happen. So and added on to the cost year over year for an increase. There is not a plan B. If this does not pass, either way, quite honestly, the superintendent, the school board and the superintendent has asked the superintendent to create a plan. So if this doesn't pass, we are going to have to go back to ballot, go back to referendum again. I don't know what that plan will look like. We're really hopeful that this is the time that this passes. There's been a lot of work and tremendous listening that's gone on throughout these 18 months. But if it doesn't, we are going to have to go back to the drawing board and we are going to have to come up with another solution. And in the meantime, come up with a temporary solution to house the students that we know are poor already. All right, what else we got? Yeah, would you mind, Custom?
No, I don't mind. I'm wondering if, I don't know if this would be better directed at you or,
Yeah.
you guys, but if you could speak more on some of the like tax relief programs that are available, maybe for Scarborough residents that are not seniors. Yeah.
Yeah, probably the biggest is gonna be the school impact fees that I can think of. I'm not sure, do you have any other mechanism?
There's nothing else that's being actively discussed right now beyond the additional relief for seniors and the school impact fee, which as you stated, is really intended to be borne by developers of which, and we've talked about this, and I know the finance committee has talked openly about it. No one's under any illusion that the developers are just gonna altruistically absorb that cost. It gets passed along to buyers. But it achieves the same, I think, policy objective, which is to not have existing residents bear the full brunt of that cost and to, I think at some appropriate level, have that cost be shared by people who are building and or buying in Scarborough and moving in. There also are some longer term efforts going on that you may have heard or read about. Part of the challenge that communities like Scarborough have is that the state aid formula for school construction really works against us, as we're considered a relatively affluent community within the context of the whole state of Maine. And we know that not all of us live in expensive beach houses, but unfortunately that sort of does skew things. And the way the aid formula is set up, we really can't count on much of any aid from the state. And that's the reality that we face for the foreseeable future. There are some discussions that are ongoing at the state level, and Scarborough is represented in those to kind of take a fresh look at that. But I don't think it's realistic to expect that there are going to be any significant changes there within the foreseeable future.
No, we did, the school board did have a workshop last Thursday with our elected officials, and that was one of the big conversation pieces we have. So it is absolutely accurate to say that Scarborough is considered wealthy. And part of that funding formula that becomes difficult is it's based on your property value versus your ability to repay. So as we know, not everybody in Scarborough, they might live in a house that's worth a lot of money, but they might not have liquid cash, right, available. And so that becomes really the pinch there, right? It's not the same. It's not one and the same. And so there is a committee that is working on it at a state level. I don't know when we can expect a change. I think our representatives that did come were willing to have that conversation, and we're open to the fact that the misnomer here is that everybody in Scarborough is wealthy. And we know that that's not true. So they were open to it. They know it. They're open to changes. The funding formula as well for our state subsidy is also, we only get about 12%. So it's a very small amount when you're looking at an overall budget.
That kind of ties into my questions, which are, one, I don't see the verbiage of either of the referendum questions. So I was going to ask if you could read them out loud. And then the second part is just curiosity about, generally when there are referendum questions, they tack on a little bit or a blurb about matching federal and state funds. Now, in the current climate, my understanding is Maine is kind of not on a, good list for any sort of matching federal funding. And then this gentleman back here said that there was like a 12%, like a state type of a subsidy, and is that all contingent on these referendum questions passed?
That's a great question. So the state funding formula for school construction is a little bit different. The 12% we get is our operating costs. So you probably have heard it said that Scarborough funds 55% of its school budget. And it's something we're very proud of as a state, as we should be. But what that means is it's 55% of the whole state. It doesn't mean each district gets 55% of their budget paid. Scarborough only gets 12%. paid. So that's where that 12% comes. The school construction fund is a little bit different. So that is a program that the state puts money into a fund that will fund construction of a certain number of schools every time, every cycle that they open up applications. So generally speaking, that's around 5 schools a cycle. We have applied the last 2 rounds. It opens every roughly 7 years. We've applied the last 2 rounds. And we are in the, Leroy will shout it out to me, 50s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. Yeah. So when you're funding 5 projects a year, the chance of us getting there is very slim to none. On top of that, you have states across the entire, schools across the entire state that also need to be rebuilt and are also old and are also facing the same challenges we are. And so that list of schools and districts that apply keeps growing and growing and growing and growing. And so the look at that funding, that construction formula is it fair? Is it reasonable to expect to only fund 5 or so schools every 7 years and expect us to move the needle on it? If you're asking me personally, I would say no. I think it would probably be more fair if that construction formula perhaps funded partial projects across the entire state versus only 5 or 6 full projects, right? And so that's where our conversation really centered on Thursday. So because we didn't make the cut on that school construction list there, and we know of no other federal funds or state funds for us to pull from, the entire burden of this, if you will, the entire ask has to go to the taxpayers. Yeah.
And so the actual language of the questions, I mean, my concern is that a lot of times referendum questions are worded so confusingly that, you know, I consider myself to be a reasonably intelligent person and able to read.
Yeah,
But is it written concisely enough so that you get a real clear sense of what you're voting for if you vote yes or no?
So let me ask you what was or let me read to you the verbiage. So for referendum question 1, shall the order entitled Order Authorizing Issuance of up to $129,850,000 in general obligation bonds of the town of Scarborough to fund costs for new 8 Corners Primary School and renovate, expand Pleasant Hill, Blue Point, Wentworth in the middle school to remove all portable classrooms be approved? And so then underneath that, it says recommendation, the town council and the Board of Education recommend approval of this question. Underneath that is a financial statement that goes into our total indebtedness as of July 3rd, 2025. And so those are our outstanding and unpaid bonds, bonds that are authorized and not been issued yet, and bonds to be issued if this article is approved, and then the costs associated with that. And then it says a property currently valued at $600K will be taxed an estimated $11,580 over the term of the bonds, averaging $386 per year. And then there's a validity statement. And then you vote yes or no. Referendum question 2 says, shall the order entitled in the event that referendum question 1 receives a favorable vote, order authorizing the issuance of up to $10 million in general obligation bonds of the town of Scarborough to fund costs for the expansion to the middle school to accommodate expected additional enrollment be approved. And then it says recommendation, the town council and Board of Education recommend approval of this question. Similar financial statements that I mentioned above, a similar validity statement. I will say this one says a property currently valued at $600K will be taxed an estimated $900 over the term of the bonds, averaging $30 per year. And then it's a yes or no.
So it's fairly straightforward in that case. So a yes vote does mean that you support.
Yes. This project,
Okay.
yes.
So that's awesome.
So it feels like we're doing well here, yes. Yes. So a yes vote means you support the construction, yes.
It is worth noting that there also are state questions 1 and 2.
Yes.
And so that, I know from talking with people, that can be a little confusing when you're driving around town and you see those
The signs.
yes or no on 1 and 2 signs. But I think that if you get into the voting booth, that language is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing you wanna make sure you're looking at, because the ballot for the town has one question up top, and then the bottom half of the ballot is all blank. So people may not realize that this question is on the back side. So you have to turn over the ballot, because the town, the state one only has one side. And if you look at it quickly on this, on the town ballot, you'll see the question up top, a bunch of blank space, and then there'll be a turnover down at the bottom. But we really want people to understand that this question is on the second page on the back side.
So that average bond payment of 360 something per household per year, how much does that vary during the course of the bond?
It does vary, to your point, the more,
But how much? Is it a 50% difference from high to low amount, or?
well, I think in the first 5 years, so the way the bond works, it's a little bit of a convoluted process and it's a little bit harder to kind of wrap your arms around. So the way that bonding for this works is we don't take out all of the money at the beginning. We take it out in what's called tranches. So as we need it, we're bonding that specific amount, not to exceed what the authorization that the voters give us. So the amounts do vary year to year, depending upon how much we've taken out. So if you go into this, this chart that I showed you, you can put in your specific home value and see each year. But I think that in this, of course, anytime you borrow the front years, it's almost like a front loaded, right? It's like your mortgage. You pay more up front than you do later on in the mortgage. This is very similar. I don't know the exact percentage increase. I think there are some years where it probably is a 50% increase, right? So about $600, but then later years it's less. And so that average is across the life of the loan that you get that amount, again, without any sort of additional help from council.
And when I was looking at it, even at the 369, you're averaging about $1 a day. And if you go up to 600, you're averaging $2 a day.
Yeah.
On your taxes.
All right, how are we doing online? Any questions there? Any hands raised? Again, if you're online and you have a question, just raise your gold high five or your yellow high five. All right, about it here. Yeah, go ahead.
I would just offer for those who are maybe not as familiar with the history of this, and I was not on the council when this previous referendum went forward 2 years ago, joined the council almost a year ago. As Shannon said, the referendum failed fairly decisively, but there was immediate feedback, and I think it was really borne out through discussions during the committee process from what I followed, that it was kind of a perfect storm of different factors that motivated, I think, different groups of people to vote against it. There certainly there was a segment of the town that just felt like it was too expensive. There also were people, and I think generally speaking, this is a generalization, but a lot of people with kids in the schools or going into the schools, or who had gone through the primary schools already, who really were very sort of, I would say, attached to this notion of the neighborhood schools, and they really didn't like the idea of a consolidated school. And then related to that, what I would say is sort of the third prong was that as it played out, the site of the consolidated school would have been in the Downs. And for better or worse, there are a lot of different opinions around town, a lot of different feelings about how the Downs how that whole thing has developed. And I think, frankly speaking, in my opinion anyway, any new school location would have been fraught with some debate. And so I think that, there really were a lot of different factors that went into that vote failing so decisively. And I know I happen to support this. I've already voted for it. As counselors, we try to be somewhat careful about, actively campaigning on these sorts of things. And first and foremost, we want everyone to be fully informed. And we hope everyone does participate. But I personally think that this is the way to go. And that the committee did a great job of kind of addressing those various concerns. And I think, you know, as was stated, it's not gonna get any cheaper and the issues will still be there. We had 3 boys who went through the schools, K through 12. 2 of them are in college now. One of them is out in the world. That oldest one, he was part of the last class that went through the old Wentworth. And that took a couple of votes to get that reconstruction approved. And by that last year, they had tiles and things, roof tiles falling off. The building was starting to literally fall apart around them. And then he went straight into portables at the middle school. Spent a whole year in portables. I really don't want any family or any children to have to repeat that type of experience. So I really hope that the town seizes this opportunity to address this now.
Shannon, can you go over the questions so that people understand? The first question is up to
Yeah,
129,
we did that,
25.
yeah.
The second question is 10.
Yes.
And that
Yeah.
there can't be cost overruns. That
Yes.
we have to cut things.
Yeah, we did both of those.
Okay, sorry. I missed it. Just wanted to make sure that was up there.
Yes, we did discuss that. Since we have a few minutes, yes, let's show, I would like to show these. And again, if you're online and you have a question, please just raise your, oops, can you go back? That's okay.
While you're bringing that up, I just want to say to Corey's point, we have had people that are now parents that started in the portables that their kids are now going into now. That's how long some of these portables have been in existence. And they're not very efficient. A lot of them have outlived their useful lives.
Especially in middle school.
Yeah, those are
Well
those are
beyond.
over 20 years, I hope.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're.
Yeah, portables are meant to be temporary solutions and not permanent additions onto a building. And so where we find ourselves across the district is that we are using them more as a permanent house versus what they're intended for. So really quickly, since we have time, I'll show you these images. This is Blue Point. When you're looking at this, just to try to understand what we're looking at, the yellow is the existing building, the green is where the additions would go on. Some of these you'll notice, if you're familiar with Blue Point, you know right now the playground is in the front of the school. So this actually reimagines moving the playground around to the side, so they would no longer be in the front. But the good news is that even as we're moving things, the playground sizes have not decreased at all. So they stay the same. So this is Blue Point. You can see the checked area. That is the addition for location for any future additions that might be needed in the future if they are needed. Go to the next.
Shannon, when you were talking about playgrounds,
Oh, yeah.
can you go over the reasoning why that we're not just randomly moving the playgrounds to the backs of the schools? More of a safety guideline for the students and the kids?
Yes, so anything that's been done, yeah, it's not a random move. So we are really fortunate that when the committee, let me take one step back. When the committee was doing their work and it came time to hire an architect firm, what they did, they interviewed, they went through the process, they ended up selecting Harriman, which is a firm that is well-known and well-versed in educational builds. So we are really fortunate for that because we are doing this work, all of this work while school is in session with minimal disruption to our students and to our staff. And so everything that is here that you see reimagined and looked at is done with student security, student safety, and well-being in mind. And so the playgrounds moving, yes, are no different.
Because they're up front now.
Yes, that one's up front. Yep. This is Eight Corners. So Eight Corners is unique because like I mentioned to you, they're going to get a brand new build. So it will be done in phases. If you look at the top square, that's the yellow is the existing footprint. The yellow is what would be in the new building would be where phase 2 is located. So what will happen is in the existing building, our teachers and students will stay there during construction and phase 1 will be built. When phase 1 is complete, the students and staff will move into that and phase 2 will be built. And then the whole school will be open. So that is what this one looks like. Again, you can see that location for future needs, if needed, is there. Next one is Pleasant Hill. This is, again, same idea. Yellow is the existing, green is going to be your addition, checked box is where we can future build. This one is exciting because we had one of our community members that participated in as a community member, participated in the process and really asked questions along the way. And now is a part of the communications effort. Lives in the Pleasant Hill area. And one of the things that he and his neighbors were concerned about was potential loss of vegetation around the school, the buffer. And so with that feedback in mind, Harriman was able to go back and reimagine this. And so there are, they were able to maintain larger swaths of that vegetation and that buffer between the neighborhood and the school, which was really an exciting thing that happened. So that's Pleasant Hill. This is Wentworth, that's the Lego, the blue Lego piece there. That is a small addition. And then again, there's another possibility, should we need it, on the other side of the building in the future. One thing, can you back up once? Sorry. One thing to note about Wentworth, when the committee was deciding this project, one of the things that they did do was they did increase the ratio of students to teachers in the classroom. And so what that did, when we talk about fiscal responsibility, and we talk about really thinking about the impact to taxpayers, this is one of the biggest examples I can give you. So what they did was they increased the ratio from 1 teacher to 22 students to 1 teacher to 24 in the classroom. And so what that'll do is it minimizes the amount of construction that is needed at one. Yeah.
Shannon, one question that I've heard from folks is, how could we already need an addition at Wentworth when that school is only about 10 years old?
Yeah.
And I do remember some of that process. Am I correct in my understanding that when that project was eventually approved, it was designed in a way where it could be relatively easily added on to?
Yeah.
And that's what we're looking at here. It's
Yeah.
kind of anticipated that. And at the time, there were all the same discussions about fiscal responsibility and how much people were willing to spend. So I believe that was compromised at that time, right?
Yes, yes, and
Yeah.
there was space where the Lego currently is in the other side. That was the locations that were identified for future growth
Right.
from the last process, from Wentworth 10 years ago.
I will add that the core spaces were sized for a larger population to accommodate those additions, so you don't have to expand the gym or cafeteria, things like that.
Yes,
That's good.
yes.
And one thing with Wentworth too is, when it was built, it had 6 additional classrooms, but due to special needs and needs of students coming here now, all of those classrooms are being utilized. So we did build this to have future use, but because of state guidelines and requirements and education requirements, those rooms are all being used right now. There is not a room in Wentworth that is not being used.
And then here's the 2 questions for the middle school. So on question 1 on the left, you can see if you were looking at the school, the portables were where it says portables removed on the left-hand side. That's where the portables currently sit. So they would be gone. That would become parking. And then on the right-hand side, so going what I call the shoehorn, when you go around the horn, on the right-hand side, that's where the addition would go. There is, again, a little space added there for future growth if we need it. You can also see that there's an addition in the front, and then as I mentioned to you, the cafeteria will be right size. The other thing that this one does that I didn't mention to you is music and art will get the appropriate space that they need in the school. So that's the question 1. Question 2 takes that is the same exact thing. It's just that right-hand addition becomes a 2-story addition instead of a 1. All right, what else do we have in the way of questions? I can stop sharing that so we can see that.
Shannon, can you also go over, because there have been questions about how this project compares to other schools that are under construction or being built? So this is a little bit different than per se another school up in Mexico per se.
Yeah, hang on 1 second. Let me.
Yeah.
The student teacher ratio.
Some of those needs teacher and a substitute teacher.
There we
go.
Okay. There is a project in Mexico, and we have had this question from a few other residents, and we're actually working on Mexico, Maine. Yes, pardon me, Mexico, Maine. We are working on an updated answer to this, but it's very hard to compare it. Sometimes we look at other projects and we just assume that you can take a number, square footage, and divide it by the number of students and come up with a dollar figure, and then that should be the same. That should equate to all projects. And that's not actually accurate in how it works. So the Mexico, Maine project is a consolidated school project. We again are working across 5 campuses at one time. So I mentioned, somebody asked me earlier, maybe Don, about efficiencies with consolidation, and this is one of the things that happens. So they are building a consolidated school, so they do recognize those efficiencies. The other thing is that they're building that school, as I understand, on land that they already own. So the cost that I talk about in buying property, they're not recognizing that because they own the land. So those two things in and of itself are pretty significant drivers of a cost difference, right? When you're running one construction project versus 5, those are pretty significant cost savings there. The other thing, as I understand it, are they consolidating K-5?
Pre-K through 8 with
Pre-K through
CDS.
And their CDS services. So that is a pretty large consolidation. So it's not as easy as picking apart a number and saying there's X number of square feet and X number of students, and therefore it's an X number of costs per student, and that being equal, all things equal. It doesn't quite work that way in construction land. The other last thing that's of note with their project is when they went to bid. So somebody asked me earlier about the escalated costs. If this does, I think the woman online, if this doesn't pass, what do we do and how do we absorb this cost? Well, this went to bid in 23, is that right?
So this one went to bid in 2023, and your project is to go to bid in 2026. Historically, looking back at those 3 years, there's been a lot of things that have impacted the construction industry, such as tariffs and escalation. Talking with our estimator, actually on the way over here tonight, they clarified that they've seen up to, on school projects from 23 to 26, 10% per year because of some of those impacts. And so keeping that in mind, as well as the bidding climate. So when that was bid, they had the way that construction bidding works for schools is you have to do the lowest qualified bidder. And so the lowest qualified bidder on that project came in under budget, which is awesome for them. They had a very competitive bid. We cannot plan that will happen on every project. So when we are estimating, we have to be conservative, and we have to hit more in the middle than the low end, because that you may not have that low bidder come in on your project. And so keep in mind that is a bid number versus an estimated number, and you have the difference of 3 years as well.
So it appears on its surface like you can look at their project and learn something or take value out of their lessons, or there's something for us in Scarborough to learn. It's not as easy as that when you start peeling back that onion, right? It's a little bit more complex and involved.
Yeah, they're definitely apples and oranges in comparison, those two projects.
And we are working to get that on our FAQ as soon as we're just fleshing out some of those numbers.
The other thing to think of too, Shannon, you mentioned 1 site versus 5, and for those that aren't in the construction industry, what that means is you have a contractor mobilizing once on 1 site if you're just doing it on 1 site. If you're doing 5 sites, you have contractors that have to mobilize on 5 different sites. So you take that mobilization and now it's times 5 versus 1. And there's several other things where that happens when you spread it across the multiple sites. And that was in response to the request to maintain the existing schools.
Yeah, and I think important to note too is with our surveys and our community forums, we asked the community about a consolidated school, and they wholeheartedly did not want that, especially through K through 5. You're looking at a project on the Mexico site that's K through 8. Means you got kindergarten that's going
Pre-K through 8.
Pre-K through 8. You got
And
pre-K
yeah.
going to school with 8th graders.
3-year-olds.
3-year-olds too.
Yeah, I can't imagine our community voting yes for that or even entertaining that, because we pretty much said we don't want a consolidated school, that it was gonna be too big, even with what we proposed. And you're adding that additional, and we really listened to the community and listened to what they wanted. They really wanted those local community schools. And it is a little bit more expensive to do that, but we really truly, over 18 months, tried to basically do what the community wanted us to do. Our group was a mix. When our surveys came back, the surveys mirrored our group to a T. So the folks that were making these decisions in this SBAC group definitely mirrored the community as what we got for responses, pretty much within 1 to 2%.
I would add too that SBAC and Harriman really did think about just about every possible scenario, all kinds of different permutations, and really thinking outside of the box and stepping back and really, acknowledging that there are a lot of places around other parts of the country where you break the age groups down differently. It's not unusual at all to have K through 5 or K through 6 in other areas. The K through 2 primary school model is, I don't know if it's truly unique to Maine, but in my experience, it's pretty unique. But at the end of the day, based on that really rigorous committee and public process, and looking at the economics of the different solutions, at least to the extent that I followed it, combined with the desire to maintain the community schools at a similar scale, this was the solution that had the most support.
Absolutely.
And one other thing too, to Corey's point, when we were asking for these things, and I don't know if Harriman can tell us, I think we probably sent you back to the board 20 times, if not more than that, to come back with solutions to cut costs. Yeah, to cut costs for us. I think we were up to many versions. But one of the things we focused on too is we brought in the facilities director and we asked him questions and said, okay, if we cut countertops, if we cut desks, if we cut curbings, if we cut floorings, if we cut wall configurations, whatever. We asked him for all these things and we asked him what his recommendation would be. And he's like, if you cut some of these things, you're gonna be replacing them in 5 years, 8 years. They're not going to last. So rather than coming back 5 and 8 years with all the renovations, because we went with an absolute thought for these things, we went in the middle and we did something that was gonna last a lot longer and be more beneficial for our schools and our population, for our students.
Shannon,
Yeah.
could you explain why the committee didn't explore alternative types of construction?
Oh, sure. And remind me to talk about that later too. The committee, at the first iteration of the committee, one of the things they thought about doing was to reduce the price and the length of time it would take to build is to use modular school buildings. And so, yeah, they would be permanent, but it's like a modular construction where it's built off-site and it's trucked in its entirety and placed, right? And so it was going to reduce the price and it was going to reduce the time. Or so that's what the committee was exploring, if that was. What ended up happening is that the state has requirements for schools, and that is one that you cannot use that type of material to build the school. So the committee did ask Diane Nadeau, who's our superintendent, they did ask Dr. Nadeau to go back and appeal that decision, and they did, and it was declined. So as it stands right now, that is not a construction module that is approved by the state. We did, I mentioned to you that we did have our elected officials in on Thursday. I did mention that that was something of concern to members of the community so that they're aware as they look at that process the construction funding process going forward. All right, are there any other questions online?
Shannon?
Yeah.
I want to just clarify, it was more on the construction procurement that wasn't allowed.
Procurement.
So construction manager versus hard bid.
Say that again, construction.
It wouldn't allow them to do construction manager versus hard bid, which is where you couldn't, going with that prefabrication fell more under the CM in the way that it was being explored for the savings of the schedule.
That is
was
not
the piece the state was not allowing.
All right, anybody else online? No? Any other questions in here? That was like 7 right on the dot. We're happy to answer any more questions if you have some afterwards. If you're online and you have some questions, please feel free to email us or write in. If you're on our website, there's a contact us button right on there, and we will respond within a few days. All right, thank you so much for joining us tonight online. Have a good evening.